Stanford University.
So let's just get started. So I know this is all about storytelling, and all the really close people in my life who know me really well say, Barbara, you teach this stuff, you're like lousy at it. It's not that I'm lousy at it, it's just that I always like to start in the middle of a story. I never start in the beginning. I know there's a beginning, you're like me, do we agree? I just always jump right into the middle of the story, and that's kind of a clue for you. So if you want to be better at, or clever at, or good at, or comfortable at beginnings, think about not starting in the beginning. Just a little clue. And it sort of fits like the car thing too. Doesn't have to start in the beginning. All right, but I will have a beginning for you. And I thought it would be fun to start with a clip. I asked a lot of my students what their favorite movie clips were. So the class I taught was Tales to Design Cars By. And we use a lot of cinema and radio and a lot, whatever. We used a lot of really cool things. But one of the movies that they chose was this one. So I thought I'd show just a short clip. What'd you think? Okay, so let's clap for the movie. Okay, so let me ask you, how many people in this room never saw any part of that movie before in their whole life? Who never saw it before? All right, so I'm gonna ask you, what's that movie about? What's it about?
A cop.
A cop, okay. What kind of car is that?
Mustang.
It's good. Anyway, who else didn't see this? You never saw it, Bridge, right? Did you? Oh, you raised your hand. You've never seen it. Do you want to see the whole movie? We're not going to watch it, but does it make you want to see more of the movie? I'm not going to be offended. I did not make that movie. I do not know Steve McQueen.
I might watch it, but maybe if there's nothing better on Netflix.
It's kind of a dated movie, but what makes it so much fun is that chase scene and the muscle car. I mean, there is definitely the return of the muscle car. There's something about one of my students, he was the TA for the class Tales to Design Cars By, loved that clip because it's like, that's the muscle car. And in fact, the title of his story in the class was Reborn in Detroit. So that sort of gives you a clue about him. Well, I just thought it'd be fun to start with an old movie. We'll end with a short clip from a very new movie, but I have a little short, I thought I'd have a short slideshow for you. We'll talk a little bit, and please be interactive and just throw comments out. Okay, so I thought I would just start by telling you some of the stuff that I do that relates to the work in the School of Engineering and maybe sets the stage for my background. One of my favorite classes, and the class that brought me to Stanford, is a class that I developed when I came here. It's called Tell, Make, Engage, Action Stories for Entrepreneuring. And that's sort of a unique class that brings in students from all different backgrounds, but it began in the School of Engineering in the Mechanical Engineering Design group. So it was mostly kind of for engineering and design students, but now students from all across the campus want to take it. And the business school students want to take it. And when business school students want to take engineering design courses, you know you're onto something. It's really interesting. The other class, Michael Shanks already mentioned it, Tales to Design Cars By. And just to give you a little bit about my background, I've been authoring papers on ways that people are innovative and creative in the classroom, so from a sort of an educational perspective, and also entrepreneurial, like startup companies. And more recently, I love cars. I just think they're so beautiful as a piece of art. I also like the idea of cars because cars remind me of family. They tell that sort of like transitional story, so that's sort of my love of cars.
What do you drive?
Where did that come from? Okay, now that's kind of a tricky question. It's a great question.
Because when you buy a car, you buy a car for a reason.
Oui, français?
Yes.
I currently am leasing a car, and it's a Fiat. A Fix It Again Tony pop top little car.
500, the new 500?
Yeah, the Cinquecento.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah, what do you drive?
I have a Lexus RX 400.
Fancy.
Well, it's 6 years old. But
Fast?
It's hybrid.
Okay.
It's very fast.
Okay. And you raised your hand?
Yes. Do you rent because you get bored with a car?
That is a very insightful question. I rent because I've been the vagabond professor for about 7 years, so I still own my property back in Boston. So I've been doing a lot of traveling, so it hadn't been price efficient for me to buy anything. But it's time to buy something. But that's a very good question. You're a good need finder. What kind of work are you in?
I am a speech and language pathology professor.
That's a really good need finding question. I like that. And you said it's a good question. What car do you drive?
There's two here.
You have two.
Here.
Okay.
Michelin Celebration car.
Okay.
BMW 225 IS to 87.
Can everyone visualize the cars that he's mentioning? Every single person almost. Oh, you can't. Okay.
BMW 325 IS.
Okay.
7 coupe black. The Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 9 MR black. And I have 2 French cars also.
What? You have how many cars do you have?
4. Love cars.
You do. So what's the French cars that you have?
Renault Clio RS
Wow.
and Opel Corsa.
Why don't you make it Citroën?
I want a 5. I want a 5th. Because when you have a car.
Did you hear a question? It was why doesn't he have a
car,
Citroën?
To me, one car it's impossible because one car has an application and my Lancer Evolution, I can commute with my Lancer Evolution. It's a fast car, and I can't park this car.
Meaning you can't.
Park.
I heard you. Come pretty. Because it's too. Oh, it's a nightmare. Okay.
Ding, scratch. So
You don't want it to get hurt. Yeah. It's spotless.
I'm just starting to race this car, and I just 1 month ago, and it's a monster.
Is a monster in a good way monster or in a bad way? Good way. It's a monster. Okay. So David Kelly promised me you'd be lively, and I can see that. And Cliff Nass said you'd be lively, and Joe knows you're lively. Okay, I'm really happy about that because I don't have a million slides. I just have a few. So just jump in. So I thought we could do a couple things tonight, and I'm open to changing, not totally changing, but I'm very flexible. So I have a couple of options in here. And I thought we could tell our car story a little bit and maybe understand how I approach my work, my teaching, my consulting, and that is to use applied design thinking and sort of a blend of like psychology and art. So let's start with some components. There's like I'd say there's 3 parts of the approach that are really worthwhile and useful, sort of the hallmarks of it. One is that there's something about truth. Like you know when someone's telling you the truth, don't you?
We like to think
I'd like
we do.
to.
We like to think we do. But there's something about vulnerability and truth in a story. Like even if someone's a tremendous actress or actor, they'll know they're not telling the truth, and that gets communicated to an audience. So I started with tell the truth in your story, and to me that means the extent to which, hi, what's your name?
Philip?
Hi Philip, we just started. I'm Barbara. It's fine. The extent to which deep understanding of you as the ultimate whoever you are, like if you're thinking about cars or car user or anything user, how that generates new ideas. It's the beginning is truth. Like you can't fake being interested in something. Students come to my office a lot, as they do to Michael's office, and maybe some of the seniors and grad students, Michael, are asking about advice for getting a job, I'm guessing. Even though they'll have no trouble getting a job, they want to get the right job, maybe. So students come to my office and like, I'm not sure what I really want to do. So-and-so's flying me, students saying, so-and-so's, Amazon's flying me to Seattle next weekend. I said, do you want to work there? Not really. Like, why are you going? Well, they're flying me. I said, but I'm going to put up a good show. I'm like, oh, it's not a good idea. I mean, there's something very missing in that story. Like, there's just, like, the truth will pop out. Okay, I know that employers want to, to reel you in and make you excited, but the truth is, okay, so I made my point about truth. So make. You have to make something. When you put your hands on something, in terms of a story, if I had something concrete to show you, if I drove in with a car, I didn't. If this really was a jetpack and I flew across the room, and I said I made this, that would have some meaning. If I'm just trying to be overly producing my presentation today, that would sort of not ring real or authentic or whatever the correct word is. So the extent to which your actions of, you said you're interested in design, like designing or building or making something feels, I put an exclamation point, feels amazing and fosters maybe a shared vision. So you can communicate who you are and you can share that with other people. So earlier I asked Bridge and I asked a few other people, like, why are you here? You were all able to say why you were here. And that's not too hard to say, but you'd be surprised by how many companies hire people like me and like Michael to help their engineers and designers and others in the company communicate amongst themselves and inside of the company and communicate that vision outside of the company. You would be surprised at how much that is a pain point. Engage. So tell, make, engage. The extent to which your story or your car story becomes a routine commitment and connects to you so much, or to another person or to a group, that you find some unified direction. Okay, so those are kind of abstractions. Tell, make, engage. So I'm going to stop for a second. What am I talking about? Any ideas? Hi? Can you hear back there? Okay. What's the point of me mentioning tell, make, engage when we're talking about stories or cars? What does that have to do with anything? Any ideas? There's no right or wrong answers. Yes?
Really, I will be personal and say the truth. I'm writing an essay for this class. I wrote you the message on the conversations.
Oh, I'm
Very
sorry.
egotistic.
I have to go look at that.
Yes, it's very egotistic what I'll say, but I have really enjoyed it. I'm writing an essay about the very first two cars I had when I first moved to the United States. And it's a delightful experience because I'm intertwining the car with feelings and what it was like. It seems like I am back into, I'm very old, but back to when I was a grad student.
What car was that you drove?
Oh, a VW Bug.
Wow.
And I actually love the color. It's red. And now I have a red Corolla. I like red.
Okay.
And
Okay, so we have some nice themes there. So for you, this is resonating. This makes some sense. It's connecting with your essays about your first experience in this country, your first experiences driving.
No, in this country.
And in this country.
Yes.
Okay, and making that, what's the make part of it?
Connection of how
Making a connection.
I found that this is very personal. Roots in this country. The second car, this is very personal. That's how I met my husband. We did lots of things. Then we went from church to, I don't want to say the whole story, from church
Well,
to
remember,
our
you only
house.
want to say as much as you're going to be comfortable with. You don't want to be so truthful that you don't want to come back to the next class. But say as we're all interested, so keep going. How did you meet him? Was he hitchhiking and you picked him up on the side of the road?
I met him through the internet, actually.
No kidding.
Yes. It's a Rambler, white, classic Rambler, white and green. And we took that one from church to our home where we had the reception. And his best man was a driver, and he hadn't driven a stick shift. So at the first stoplight, because we only had one seat belt in those days, everybody flew on the floor, including my best friend who was a matron of honor. And I'll never forget that. And I had to say it.
That's a good story.
Anyway, it's connected again. It's very personal.
What's your first name?
Henriette.
Henriette.
Yes.
So do you speak French as well as this gentleman over here?
Yeah. I'm not French, but I speak it. It's connected to something very personal.
Okay.
And since at the end of the class, I don't mind saying it, I lost my husband
I'm sorry.
about 7 months. So it's nice.
So it's hard. It's still hard to talk about it.
Yeah, but it's nice to put it together.
Well, and this is the time. This is a chance for you to do that. So Henriette, sadly, but in a way, beautifully and nostalgically reflecting back on a very touching moment, you help us and tell the story. When you cry, you make someone care, and when you laugh, you make someone care. So you told us, you knew we were getting ready for you said this is personal, so you knew it was going to be really touching. So, thanks for telling us that. Okay.
I don't want to take the floor, but because I've been so interested in this class, I've loved it, because I don't know anything about cars.
So Michael, she's loved it.
I did. I found something that whenever you say it's right, that's multicultural, that has to do with writing. And it's a very funny story. Maybe you would like to read it.
Yeah, can you, I would love to read it. Can you say that for when we talk about Mason Williams, and we'll add that to and maybe that we could put it on the
I'm sorry
website.
taking the floor.
Do not apologize. Do not
I
apologize.
like to talk.
Yes, and you're good at it. You're good at it. So, wait, did I miss? Yeah. So one of the reasons I chose the Mason Williams, I'm looking at my slides like I'm looking at them for the first time. I don't know why, because they're my slides. Did you get a chance to read the Mason Williams story? If you didn't, it's fine. It's fine. But it's a really short story, and it's a lot of fun. And I thought it was sort of interesting to think about how Mason Williams wrote autobiography, like autobiography. Who's chit-chatting over there? What are you two talking about? Oh, the story. Okay, you're going to read it now. Okay, that's fine. Well, I was sort of thinking about using telling the truth and make something and engage in the context, partially with Mason in that story, but also in sort of in the big picture with quotes from students in other classes. I rearranged this morning, last night, and this afternoon. So the next time I talk, I will put your quotes in there too. So feel free to add. So for telling the truth in your story, I remember one of the classes I taught last year, I asked a student, I said, so you're in the class, so what's your story? And he said, is there a template for story? No. I mean, if there was a template, we would all, I mean, I wouldn't be here, Michael wouldn't be here. There's not really a template for very many things in life, is there? So is there a template to tell my story? Another person said, I haven't been this excited about my work since when one of the students in the car class talked about the first driving experience for him was driving his grandfather's tractor. And he gave us this really, great descriptive opening, talked about the tractor, and then he accidentally, because it was his first time in a tractor, he was 6. He accidentally pushed the gas pedal and ran right into the bull. And the bull's name, and the bull then was renamed the name of the grandson, DiCarlo, so now the bull is DiCarlo. It was really a cute story. But when he told the class that story, the class was like, you can't make that kind of stuff up. So I want to ask you a question about truth. Can you tell, I asked already, can you tell when someone is telling the truth? So I'm going to ask a second part of it. When is it more likely to detect when someone's telling a lie? When you don't know them or when you know them really well? So let me ask it again, because it's kind of a tricky question, but there is an answer. When are you more likely to detect when somebody is not telling the truth, they're lying? When you first meet them or when you know them really well? Okay, so we got some mixed feelings. Okay, who said first meet them? What? Tell me more about that.
Well,
Wait, which thing is it? You're more likely to detect?
yeah, when you first meet them.
You're more likely to detect a lie?
Yeah.
How come?
Because that first impression, I can't remember the name of the book. It was like, I can't remember.
You don't have to back it up with literature. I'm going to just believe your
And,
thinking.
You can tell. It's an intuitive sense. Policemen know this from the first 20 seconds in that conversation. They've already figured out what's going on and they know if you're telling the truth. And that's a human natural instinct.
Okay, so when you first, what's your first name?
Bill.
Bill. Is there people that agree with Bill? The people that agree with you, can you say why you agree with Bill?
I agree with the policeman because I always say the truth when I've done very bad things and I never get tickets.
You've done very bad things?
So I think telling the truth from the beginning is the way to didn't get a ticket.
Okay, so that makes sense to you. Okay, you want to add to it?
The name of the book I read where I was enlightened by this concept is called Blink.
Oh yes, good. That's actually a good example. Do you disagree?
No, I would just say the person's much more likely to lie to you if there's no relationship because they can tell you whatever they want to.
So are you agreeing with him that you're more likely to detect the lie in the beginning or later?
Figure out what my logic would be because I do agree with you.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, I like your logic. Are you an engineer?
No.
But there's like a real there's like a nice convergency there. I like that. Might I ask you what you do? If you feel like saying what you.
Well, I went to law school, but I never practiced law. I was actually in the car business.
Oh, interesting. Law and cars, they go together interestingly. Cool. Is there someone, do you agree or do you want to disagree? Do you agree with him?
I have a question.
Sure.
So is the objective to determine whether or not they are more likely to lie to you or you're more likely to detect it?
Now you're an engineer.
Which one?
I said you're an engineer. No, I'm just joking. Is the objective. Let's say there's no objective. It's just a question for you to make my point around why.
Do I know that they're lying?
So my
Or
question
are they
to.
lying?
No, okay, now I'm confused.
Because I feel like with a friend that you've known for a while, you're more likely to detect that they're lying. But with someone you just met, there's no consequence for them lying.
Okay, so, all right, so you're asked very clever way that you framed that. So I like the way you positioned it. So my question is really twofold. When are you more likely to be able to detect when somebody's not telling you the truth? And what's different about the timing and temporal piece here? The beginning when you know them, you don't know them at all, it's like 10 seconds, 20 minutes, versus into a relationship. And so I think we know what the answer is. Does anyone still disagree? Is there anyone that thinks it's later? Okay, the more you know somebody, the more you're invested in them telling the truth to you. And the more you know somebody, the more you're going to be ignoring all those cues, those tells, those factors. So, I mean, the jokes around, lying about relationships and, honey, are you cheating on me? Who's cheating on you? What? Why are you asking that question? What do you mean? So that, there's like this sort of like conversation, and people always say, how come I didn't notice that? Well, truth is more likely to be seen dramatically in the beginning. And that's why first moments in storytelling is so powerful. First moments in everything. The first moment you drive anything, first for anything. Setting the stage for Mason Williams a little bit.
So is that why you start stories in the middle?
Maybe. Maybe I just intuitively need to jump right in the middle, and because I don't tell the truth? Oh, no. Well, wait a second. Wait a second. What's your first name?
David.
Do you think I'm telling you the truth?
Yes.
Yeah. You're getting a sense that I'm being real. Okay. A few more quotes here on making something. The first car I ever drove was a 1936 Chevrolet four-door sedan. I did a lot of firsts in that car. Who wrote that?
Mason Williams.
Good. I made my first artistic statement in that car. So let's think about Mason. We'll skip engage for now. I'm going to go out of order because I like to do that. Let's go to Mason. Did you like it? How many have heard it before? Really? Wow. I have to tell you the truth. I hate saying the truth, and I hate when people say I'm telling the truth, because otherwise would I be lying? The thing about this clip that I found from the music and the reading was a total accident. I was watching some late night television, and someone mentioned it was a late night show, SNL, reflecting back on some other show. Was it the Smothers Brothers? And Mason Williams was apparently on the Smothers Brothers. I'm like, why did that sound familiar? Because someone had mentioned I should read, since I was going to be teaching the class, this short story. And they said, he made that famous song, Classical Gas. Now I understand his writing. So I read the story, then listened to the music. It sort of gives you a sign of his art and a piece of his art. It's just really beautiful. For those of you that heard it for the first time, I'm happy you had a chance to see it. So I just chose this clip. It's not necessarily the best clip from the story. So let's talk about Mason Williams' story. For those of you that did read it, did you like it? Did you enjoy it?
Yes.
Okay. What did you like about it?
You mean the story?
Yes.
Again, I'm going to take the...
Well, just say something. It's okay. We'll let other people
I
talk
like
too.
it because it's very well written.
Okay.
It's very vivid. Again, there is this nice conversation of the author with his... I'm not putting it in words, but you can really imagine his life, and the car is like his companion.
It's
and
nice.
I also counted how many cars there were.
Okay, so stop there. So in case someone else is going to say that, that's beautiful. Someone else. That's really nice. Somebody else. What struck you about Mason Williams' writing, and what's your takeaway or memorable moments from it? Yes.
I like just how he talks about like his experiences with these different cars and how it's all connected with that certain car and certain periods in his life.
Yeah, that whole transition from life, the steps through life, and the path through his life, and the car that is associated with it. Do you remember some of the cars?
I remember, the first one he got, and then I remember just like the stories where he ran it into the back of like another truck and just different things.
So I think you're like me, because I, like you, remembered those moments, and maybe the cars, not so much the names of the cars and the typical cars, but I bet some of the people in the room do remember the cars.
There's like there's something like kind of basic you got, and then there was not the song, it was
The Sally, yeah.
yeah, so yeah.
So this clip is the first car I ever drove by myself was a 1936 Chevrolet four-door sedan. I was 14 years old. Is there anyone else who was behind a car at 14? No kidding. Younger? Really? How old were you when you were driving a car?
12. Oh, it wasn't a car. It was a World War II Jeep. That's what I was 12 years old.
Really?
Yes.
And you really got it to move?
Yeah.
How?
Well, it had a button at the floor. That's how you started it. It didn't have an ignition.
Where were you?
I was in the Philippines.
That is some story. You start any story with the first car I ever drove was a World War II Jeep in the Philippines, and you have everyone's attention. They're all like, who is that down there? It's a good story. So you were 12, and how old were you when you first drove a car? 11. What was your car?
51 Studebaker.
No kidding. And did you get in trouble?
Not for that one. I got in trouble with the 58 Chevy.
Did you take it around the block? Did you?
I started driving the 58 when I was 14 in Evansville, Illinois. I got away with it for about 6 months.
Where did you go with it?
I just drove around town when my parents were asleep.
Oh my goodness, you're like a devil, like a little. You got into so much trouble in the middle of the night, and you got snuck it back in there. They didn't even know.
In trouble.
No.
Until I brought it home and I found my father sitting on the porch waiting for me.
That's a great story. Okay, anyone else drive earlier than 14? You with the pinkish shirt, lavendery pink shirt. When was the first time you drove a car?
I don't remember how old, but I was well under 16.
Yeah, you were well under 16?
Yes, I just remember borrowing a grandmother's car, getting in and driving around. I was interested in what happened. Okay.
Do you remember what car it was?
Oh yeah, 1963 Bonneville Pontiac.
No kidding. So we remember those. First, I mean, there's something very powerful about first. I'll continue. Were you going to say something else?
No, I was just entertaining. I drove those cars for many years. They had all sorts of interesting experiences. Learned about brakes and them not working. You'd be on a hill and suddenly the car didn't really want to stop. You had to figure out what to do there. And that was kind of entertaining.
That's a good
One time stopping the car with reverse gear instead of brakes because, well,
Did you know how to do that?
I learned.
You figured it out.
Many experiences in cars where, as my kid always says, you're going to learn now.
Okay. Anyone else have a first car experience? Okay, so this is the clip that I chose. Did anybody have a favorite clip that they feel like telling us was from Mason's reading? What was yours?
Well, I like the part at the end where he talked about
Can you read it?
freedom and law. Yeah, I did. In fact, I made a copy of it to give to a friend who's a car collector and is a very conservative person, and I thought he would enjoy the part towards the end where he
The
talks
Hollywood?
about, well, and freedom and then the loss of freedom, and maybe we won't even get to drive cars anymore. Maybe we'll be forced to drive cars.
Could you read it? Could you read it?
I read the whole thing.
No, could you read that aloud, that part?
Oh.
Do you mind? You don't have to.
Well, I'm not. Let's see if I can find it. I really enjoyed it. Freedom of the road in America used to stand for the freedom to come and go as you please, when and wherever. But now the whole country's enslaved to that freedom. We can't stop. We're like a racehorse shot full of speed to make us run harder than is good for us. To win for the owners and lose for ourselves. To win the race for only the price of the chance to run. And there's other parts talking about small towns. It says many towns, especially smaller ones, are traffic concentration camps. They have so many direction signs, lights, and yellow lines that the people don't ever have a moment when they figure things out for themselves. To go through Eugene, Oregon, for example, is like going through a game of hopscotch designed to break your leg. My mother, who lives there, told me they change all the one-way signs, street signs and stuff from time to time to make it even more confusing. It makes you wonder if all the signs, and there are a lot of them, and expensive ones too, aren't perhaps creating the problems they solve. That's probably what's going on. People have always been suckers for the same old trick. If it causes a lot of trouble, it must be worth doing. Anyway, the whole
That's
piece
nice.
is written, and it's just
It's nice.
It's just really. It's
Oh, I'm so glad you
Thank
appreciate-
for finding it.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. That's nice. And I think you, as you read it, wherever you are in your lifespan and career path and whatever age you are, I think it sort of like touches you in a different way. It's a great story. And if you didn't get a chance yet, it's on. We put it up on the website. Any other comments about?
There's
Yes.
some literary playfulness. It's in your first slide here. My first sallies into neighboring towns, my first sally.
In the back seat. Yeah.
He does that a lot. Some of it you would miss if you were hearing it read to you. But reading it, he talks about you reap what you sow. He starts the next sentence, sow, S-O-W.
I know.
And he plays those little games.
Yeah, he's very, very, very clever. Yes.
I was sort of drawn in the beginning because I felt like I was there, like I could see it, I could smell it, I was feeling it, like a good novel, you feel like you're there. And then I felt like as he got older, it's almost as if he were becoming a little bit mentally unstable and paranoid. And from a psychological perspective, I could sort of see him going down.
He was getting angry, a little angry.
He was getting angry, and I was a little disappointed because he was such a down-home person. You could just tell by the way he had written in the beginning. And then at the end, he sort of pops this big, dramatic, philosophical thing. I was a little surprised at the ending.
The ending did surprise. Yeah, I enjoyed it and it surprised me. And maybe part of the enjoyment is in the surprise. Okay. Anyone else feel like jumping in around what you read or what you connected with? Hi guys back there. Just saying hi. You can come closer if you want to. You're fine. Okay. No one wants to move closer. Any more comments about Mason? Did it make you think of? Did reading that story make you think of other things that you read or other movies that you watched? You don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Each reason I thought that he became more and more sort of knowledgeable about the cars and their value, and especially there's this passage where he talks about this car from 1930 P or something, and he really takes time to admire the craftsmanship of the way
Nice.
they design. And first he keeps it in his garage, but it's a waste of energy. He takes it out and shows it off, not because he wants to be, show it off, but he really wants other people to enjoy the beauty of the car. That's the way I.
That's nice. Thank you. So I can't be a professor and not tell you some of the key points of narrative. And I promised Michael I would, and I promised myself that I would. So I chose 8. I like the number 8. It's my favorite number. I'm born in August. That's the 8th month. I'm born in the 8th day. That's 8, 8, 8. I like 8s. And people remember in chunks. You remember in chunks of 4. So I figured 2 chunks of 4, 8. So our minds are built to remember stories. That's just the way it goes. We're not built to remember data. We're built to remember stories. So anyone who's in advertising or in sales, this is no story's gone untold. All new design is redesigned. It's like this is not a new thing. But there are people that are talking about storytelling like it's this new thing. It's not new. In fact, it's being used so much that I think it's probably getting diluted. So one, we talked about introductions and firsts, like with Mason Williams, the first paragraph in his story, the first car I drove. I had a lot of firsts in that car. So one, introductions and beginnings are very powerful. Does anyone remember the first thing that I did in the group? It was before the class technically started, but what's the first thing that I did? I did. And what did I ask?
Why they were here.
Yep.
First you tricked us and brought us down front.
That
We
is
didn't know then you were going to point at me.
That's funny. I did do that, didn't I? Yes, I'm filled with little engagements. But my first thing was why are you here? Okay, so why? That helps me understand a little bit about your motivation. A little bit. I mean, you could say something different than maybe what's on your mind. But second, beginnings are so powerful. In fact, I just want to stop for a second. There's a paper that I'm writing with some graduate students, and the working title is First Moments in Entrepreneurial Storytelling, or the power of first moments in entrepreneurial storytelling. And one of the words that comes up for us a lot is vulnerability. And one of my students actually said, and people in industry have been disagreeing with her, but I agree with her. She said, if I don't stumble when I'm telling my story, or if someone else doesn't stumble in the beginning of telling their story, I think it's too practiced and I stop listening. And I think that's very interesting, because all around Silicon Valley, people are paying lots of money for someone to produce their story and tell it super beautifully. You're shaking your head, so you kind of agree with me. Yeah, and there's something beautiful about a not overproduced story. So now they're being coached to tell the story where there's vulnerability, which is hilarious to me. Can you show me how to be vulnerable? I'm like, I have to show you how to be vulnerable? Find your vulnerability. So there's something very powerful about beginnings because you are vulnerable. And so the student that wrote the story that I mentioned already about cars called Reborn in Detroit, he said firsts have a flaw in them, kind of like the Detroit cars. And I thought that was really beautiful. All right, so first. Second is, the truth in the story maybe directs your mastery, or maybe finding the truth in your story helps you find your mastery. It's like Henriette was telling us about the cars, and you were telling us about driving that World War II. Thank you. I was going to call something else. Thank you. There's something about that helps you feel powerful and confident. Tension is part of the arc of the story. There has to be a conflict. There has to be a tension. There has to be And I already said our minds are built for stories. And I want to add the concept of episodic memory. It's nothing simple about that concept. It's a very complex psychological construct that fMRI, advanced research, people like Anthony Ragner are taking a look at that. And my niece is studying at Boston College, looking at different parts of the brain, temporal lobe, medial lobe, all these different parts of the brain. But for our purposes and for my language, I'm going to say episodic memory is kind of like mental time travel. So what Mason Williams did in his story is took us on this little mental time travel. And that's what I want to try to do a little bit with us today. We'll do a little exercise. I want you to just go back in time a little bit. Not hypnotism or anything like that, just mental time travel. Okay, 5. Actions paint a visible picture. I think you said the story came alive to you. I think you said Mason Williams' story came alive. So if it paints a visible picture and you actually can sort of like step into the story, like you feel like you're actually there. And there are people that have a natural gift at doing that, but it can be taught and you can get better at that. If it's something you know a lot about, think about it. You know a lot about cars? Every single one of you are experts on cars. I could pull you out in any context, in any group, and I could say, come up here and talk for 30 seconds about cars, and you would just blow the entire group away. They'd go like, how did you know that? Because you know it, you're an expert on cars. We easily step into the character's shoes. There's something very important about this word overused again, empathy. So in the story, the author, the reader, the speaker, you are inviting someone to step into the shoes. In the music, into their shoes, into the painting. 7, it's an art to leave gaps in the story. I went through my slide deck, but there was actually a blank slide to point out that don't give them the whole story. Don't give them the beginning, the middle, and the, no. It's an art to leave some gaps. It's the right gaps you have to leave. Sometimes I leave the incorrect gaps. 8, there's something about language, whatever language that is, that we can make an emotional connection with. And I was just talking to a class in Boston. Students in the class spoke. So one student was from Japan, one student was from China, one student was from Korea, 2 students spoke Portuguese. So I would say 8 out of the 30 students had English as a second language, and the others said they had sort of a knowledge of another language. But my point is, as soon as you understand a language other than one, it expands your global view, it expands your worldview. And with story, we respond emotionally to story regardless of language. And I don't have this commercial because it wouldn't let me download it, but there's a commercial, a famous commercial about a car. Tell me if you know it, the Japanese car, the Japanese commercial with the father and the son. And it's in Japanese and you don't need to see it in English, you get the whole picture. It's really touching. Did anyone see it? So now you're gonna wanna Google it. Do you know it?
However, in different cultures, the way in which a story is built is different. We are sort of sequential.
That's a good point.
We are going to address that.
I think that's it. I wasn't going to because I think that's a lot to do in one class, but I think it would be a good, if this was a course on car storytelling. In fact, you know what, I'm gonna make a note and make sure I do that in my class this spring. Can you come up after class and make sure I write that down? Henriette, promise? Okay, that's a good point. And I think it's something that students would really appreciate. Okay, any comments about anything so far? Any one of those, wait, Henriette, 1 second. Henriette, I'm gonna ask you to hold on a second because I'm not gonna remember. Any questions about these? Does anyone want to add one, like a factor that you think will help us understand narrative? Yes? Could you hold for number 2 for a second? Will you remember your question? Okay.
I had a thought on one of the things.
Was it the next slide?
No, you were saying something about somebody liked it and somebody stuttered in the story.
Stumbled.
Stumbled.
That's so interesting that you said stuttered because that's true too.
That's what I was doing, stuttered. The thought that this brought to mind was, I don't know how many people are familiar with Navajo blankets and weaving. Right?
Yes.
But the Navajo, when they make one of these blankets, they have to leave a flaw. If they don't leave a flaw somewhere in the blanket,
Oh, that's nice.
they put too much of their soul into the blanket or something like that. I've forgotten the whole story behind it. There's somebody who does it better than I do. But I thought that was it because the blanket, as I understand it, was supposed to tell a story.
That's an artful example. And that fits in with what I was saying about the flaw and stumble.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, so that was sort of like one. And you said number 2 you wanted to make a comment about?
I don't really understand what it is.
Okay, so I guess what I was trying to get at, and maybe we should change the way that's written. I'm just thinking as I'm saying this. I changed that 4 times to fit on the slide, and maybe it's better to say, finding the truth in your story is where you find your mastery. So maybe it's a little bit abstract, but I'll tell you where it came from. I was on Caltrain. I wasn't driving the train. I was taking Caltrain from San Francisco to class in 2008, and there was a guy not far away from me who was drinking a green tea, and I was drinking green tea, so we just started talking. It ends up his name is Peterson Conway, and he was one of the co-founders of PayPal. But his love right now is bicycles and cars and automating them and green and energy and everything. So we started talking. He didn't know what I did yet, but he said, I'm believing that finding the truth in my story is where my mastery is. I said, say some more about that. And then when he did, I said, can you come in and talk to my class? And so we did deliver a design challenge to my class. And he talked a lot about how he was a young guy, but he'd already started up a company and they sold it. And his truth is his mastery. His mastery is his truth. Too abstract? Are you sort of...
No, I think I sort of understand it. We're almost with, the Renaissance guys like Michelangelo, who had this vision of what he was going to paint on the Sistine Chapel wall, and the Pope came along and said, well, I don't like that. Michelangelo painted what he wanted to paint. Not
Yes.
what the Pope told him to.
Yes, yes.
Yes. This was the master.
Yes, I don't know that story, but if that's true, that's a perfect example. Where'd you hear that? Read that.
I worked as a tour guide, so I used to tell that story about twice every day for a
So,
6-month period.
What are you giving tours of?
I used to do a free one of the Vatican.
No kidding.
And then when you came out of St. Peter's Basilica, you'd say, well, that part was free, the next part's a pay part, and then you try and get the people who listen to the free part to give you a few euro to show them around.
Did you do it in English or in Italian?
Oh, I did it in English because it's for an English audience.
Okay.
I used to do that.
So,
doing the Colosseum.
So let me ask you, do some work for me then, help me. What would be the way to say that? What's my soundbite for that? What's a better way to say it than the way I said it? Well, think about it. Can we think? Let's all think about that, because they're all smiling because I'm putting you on the spot. They're like, "Do you have a way? Do you have a way to do it, Mr. T-shirt with the cool design on it?"
I do not.
Okay, he said.
I was going to ask because I don't understand that one or number 5.
But do you understand that now that he talked about it?
No.
No?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not
Michael.
sure I understand what mastery is, like in this context.
So, just thinking for a second about how much time I should think about this.
What do you mean, the heart of the matter, mastery?
I think I'm trying to give you 8 elements or 8 factors that help you understand narrative. And I think even if it's fiction or fantasy or whatever, horror, there's something about truth that masters that story. And you are the master of that story by finding your truth. Like whether it's...
Not put them into one pot. I mean, fantasy and all other types of narrative. What narrative are you speaking about? I'm just wondering, what kind of narrative are you dealing with here?
Okay, so you're right.
Is it an advertisement? Is it a romantic story? Someone had Sally somewhere at the back? Or what kind of...
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. That's a wonderful question. It's an excellent question. I wasn't prepared to go. Did you say, I know it's a wonderful question?
Of course, it's my profession.
Yeah, okay. So can you tell me the answer then?
To what?
Tell me.
You should specify the narrative, and then you will speak about the factors that will
Okay, I have enough ego to not be defensive about this. My point, and you would be a much better person to talk about the narrative piece, my point wasn't to talk specifically about one kind of narrative. My point was just to give everyone sort of like a hint at the elements of narrative that help us understand story. So yes, you can't put everything... No, I think you're right, and I will make a note of that to make sure the next time...
It's important to specify the narrative, then the audience will understand what kind of mastery you are speaking and where tension helps to create, and the beginning is always the weakest point, so that's why you never start with the beginning, because you return to the beginning when you are done, and then you will write or tell the most beautiful beginning.
We're not necessarily talking about writing here.
No, it's like speaking as well.
Well, let me ask you something, since you've been so good at pointing it at me. Is there anything that I've said so far about story and storytelling that told you something new? Or maybe something that somebody in the class said that gave you sort of a new picture of things?
Not really.
Okay. All right, so my goal isn't necessarily to teach you something new, but it would be nice if you have a takeaway that you could see something in a new way or be creative about something. All right, so a little downer, but that's okay. Let's, in a good way. I appreciate that, and I want you to challenge me as much as you want to.
I'm sorry, I'm just straight here.
No, you're not. No, you get to ask any questions. Okay, so I still stick with my 8, but thanks to all of you, I think I will reframe them a little bit differently. And you said you don't understand. What was the other one you don't understand? You said 1 and?
Number 5.
So without me changing all of them right now, this is not a working session, it's number 5?
2 and 5, yeah.
You know, I have to tell you that I've used some of these narratives before, and you are much better at helping me define them. So number 5. Actions paint a visible picture. Is it my English you're having trouble with?
I don't know what that means. It's too brief. I don't.
Well,
Okay.
The story that the guy tells earlier about going out for a drive, sneaking out in his 58 Chevy, that story was a good story because when he told the story of his dad being on the step at home, we've got a image of the front porch and the step, and we can imagine him coming up the drive in a 58 Chevy, switching the engine off, and really not wanting to get out of the car. He knows the conversation he's going to have with his dad. We got all of that, or I got all of that at least, from this one phrase, and my dad was waiting on the step. If he'd have just said, oh, my dad was cross when I got home, there wouldn't have been anything.
Yeah, that was you saying my dad.
Better than saying the sky was blue and the grass was green and the porch was red or whatever. Right?
Yeah, the action, his dad sitting on the step is what makes the story.
Yeah, and you told us about the Vatican, and we're sort of anyone who's been to Rome or wants to go to Rome is trying to visualize that. So I feel like my work is about painting a picture, and I actually do paint. So telling a story or to paint a picture, making it visible for you, making some things that are maybe intangible visible to you to get your attention for a purpose. Like our purpose today is just to have some fun with cars and car stories. And please challenge each other and actually challenge me. I mean, I'm the one that, let's not hurt anybody else's feelings in here. All right, so, no, my feelings aren't hurt. That came out wrong. My feelings are fine. I have a big ego. Okay, I wanted to do this little exercise. I wanted to think us to reflect back for ourselves. So what I came up with a couple, and I was telling Michael when we talked about the class, I have some movies to show you too, but I was saying when I work with a class that I don't know, and I don't know you, right? And you said you're new here, I'm new here too. So this is my first time with this class, so we share something in common. I don't know everybody in here, so I have a couple of ideas. So there's one that I want to try, and it's called an airplane exercise, which changes, it's kind of like opportunity mapping. It changes based on the group. So please take a piece of paper if you want to. Wait, can you send one down to him as well? Yeah. Who said sure? Okay, can you make an airplane out of paper? Okay, so can you open up your airplane and just write, I want you to write a question in your airplane. Yeah, I don't want you to ruin your flying airplane, but I'd like you to write a very specific question. And it's anonymous, remember, because it's in your airplane. Well, it's not totally anonymous because you're going to be flying it. Okay, so write a question, a provocative question that you would like to ask about somebody's personal car story. So I have a few in mind already. So my question would be to you, what's your first, I asked you to think about it for the class, what's your first memory? Like, what's your first car memory? Okay, so that's a question I have. But can you come up with some more questions? Like, if you're going to ask anybody any question about a car, what question would you have? And could you write it inside the airplane? Make it so that we can read it. A provocative, sort of like a question that maybe sort of pushes a little bit, pushes the boundary. And write it inside the airplane so that someone can read it. It's okay. All right, okay, that's all right. All right, so does everyone have an airplane that can fly with a question in it? I want you to aim it for somebody and fly it at them. And whoever gets closest to it, pick up the airplane. All right, so we're going to start way in that back corner with the navy blue jacket guy. What's your question in your airplane?
It's my own question. My plane didn't fly.
I'm sorry. Could you read your question?
Sure. How would you feel if someone crashed your favorite car?
I like that. Okay, since you wrote the question, I'd like you to answer it.
It's really, really bad. Like to the point where I'd have a hard time forgiving the person. Especially if the person knew that the car went wrong.
Okay, okay. Did that ever happen to you?
Fortunately, no.
Fortunately, no. Okay. Could you take your airplane that you have, even though there's a question already answered it, could you fly it towards somebody? Just so we'll pick the person that way?
Am I allowed to turn it into a ball because that's...
Sure. Sure. As long as you don't hurt anybody, sure. It went, who's the closest person that got it? Okay. But you know what's in there, so could you read your question that you have in your hand? Do you have an airplane in your hand? Can you read the one that's in your hand? Yeah. Not the one he flew to you, but the one, yes.
Have you run over anything that caused a lot of commotion? If so, what was it?
Could you read that again?
Have
you ever run over anything that caused a lot of emotions? If so, what was it?
Okay, do you want to answer?
I think cat.
Oh dear.
And what car were you driving?
Car. It was a Fiat.
Okay, and is the cat alive?
No, I didn't stop because it was, traffic behind me.
Oh, so it's one of those busy roads, and you think it might have been a cat. Okay, could you take your airplane that does fly and send it to someone, even though we're not going to use that question? What was the emotion that it caused?
Well, you feel pretty bad. You feel bad you can't stop and go back and check on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes, thank you. Can you open the question that you have, not the one that's in that one, since we already heard it?
Okay, open this one.
Yes, please.
It says, was it a stick or automatic?
That's the question. Was it a sticker?
That's what it says.
Oh, I like the ambiguity there. Okay, fill in the blanks. Okay, I'll help you with it. I want you to go back in time to when you were 16. Tell us a 16-year-old car story. Was it a stick or was it an automatic?
The answer to that question was a stick.
Okay, and what's the 16-year-old memory?
My father says, you're going to get in trouble in that car. And I drove out, and some guys threw a cigarette butt in my car. We pulled over, there was a fist fight, blood, guts, and more driving.
Wow.
So that was my stick shift.
That's your stick shift story. Did you write the question, was it a stick shift, or was that your question?
That was not my question.
That's a very good story for that question you didn't even know you were going to get. What car was it that you were driving?
My 57 Chevy Hot Rod.
Okay.
That you still have?
No, I replaced it.
But you were just saying that it's bringing up a lot of memories. Can you take your airplane, it doesn't matter what it says on it, and just send it to somebody who has a question in their hand so we could just choose someone to ask and answer a question?
I'm sorry.
Can you shoot your airplane towards somebody, either someone you choose or just arbitrarily?
I did already shoot my airplane.
You did shoot your airplane?
I already shot my airplane.
Can you shoot him? Okay, everyone's laughing at the innuendo. We got it, we got the joke. Can you just send it again anyway?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, who did it, okay, could you read? Now, we already know what that question is. Do you have a question in yours?
I followed the exercise.
Okay. Thank you. What's your name?
Brian.
Brian?
And Ryan, and I am an engineer.
Okay. Yay! We have an engineer. Okay.
Why do we need a car to be successful?
Huh.
And that's kind of an odd question for me, since I don't really need one so much to be successful anymore, since I work from home. But at the same time, I did. I drove out here from Iowa for my first job, so I needed a car to get me and all my stuff here, 2,000 miles. So I guess it's very handy to get you to places with better opportunities.
Yeah, that's nice. So what car was that you drove from Iowa to here?
Oh, it was an awful piece of crap.
Good.
It was a 1996 Saturn SL1.
Did it got you here?
My dad didn't think it would. We were pretty sure it was going to explode.
But it didn't.
It did not. It managed.
So I'm asking a lot of questions. Does anyone have a question for Ryan based on his story? Let's turn it out to the group. Opportunities, new land.
Why did you come to California?
Got a job.
Why did you specifically for the job in California? What was it about California?
I never intended to come to California, and I actually did exactly the opposite of what you're suggesting. I had a job interview out here for a company that I had no interest in, and I took it anyways. And as soon as I landed in the Bay Area, I'm like, oh wow, this place is awesome. And I didn't get that job, so I started searching for other ones. But managed to land the next one. I was here 3 weeks later.
I like that idea that if it sounds like a lousy idea, you should try it. If it sounds like a bad idea, let's do it. I like that. That's good. I like that. Good, good. All right, thanks. Any more questions for Ryan? Okay, Ryan, could you shoot your airplane to somebody? Doesn't matter if they read that question or another one.
See how this one goes. Okay.
I think it hit the guy. I think it. Okay, I think it hit. Okay. Oh, okay.
Perfect.
So can you read your question? Or you could read the same question if you want to, or the other question.
Do you like Tesla? Will you buy it?
Huh. It was just named Best Car of the Year, right?
Motor Trend's best car of the year, so it
Okay. Do you like Tesla?
I do like Tesla.
So let's go into a memory with that.
But I'm not going to buy it.
Okay. What's the other question that he sent to you? What was the question in that one? You want to go deeper. What was that question?
That one's already been read.
Oh, I know, but I was.
Have you run over anything that caused a lot of emotions? If so, what?
Do you want, I know we've already read it, but do you feel like answering that one? You don't have to.
Well, I don't think I've ever run over anything.
Okay. Well,
Maybe-
good.
Maybe a nail. I got a flat tire.
Okay.
But, you know.
Okay. Shoot. Fly your airplane.
Okay.
What's your name?
John.
Thanks, John. It looks like it hit the guy with the glasses next to you.
Boomerang.
Or did a boomerang. Okay. Could you read the question that you have in your hand, though?
Well, this is the Tesla question.
Right.
No, the question that you had.
No.
I don't, this is the only one in my hand.
Okay, can somebody ask, can you tell us your name?
David.
All right, David. Let's give David a question from our question box that we have in front of us. Who's got a good question?
Save your life? How?
Say that again?
Did a car ever save your life? How?
That's a great question.
I would say no. No car has ever saved my life. I've saved a few cars' lives.
That's nice.
And I've managed not to sacrifice mine while working on it.
Okay. So what car lives did you save? What car's lives did you save?
I've saved quite a number. When people say that they're going to junk them and crush them, I've tended to try to get them. If I thought it was something I could get running, I would save them. The Renault Dauphine, it was a British car. I forget its name now. A couple of Citroëns.
Wow.
Just anything interesting. And basically, if I could get it running at all, then I could find someone who would buy it for, $50, $200 and get it out of my driveway. But I hate to see them crushed when they're shooting on the road.
We want to save.
Like the Humane Society.
Yes, the Humane Society for Cars. Could you send your airplane that way to that area of the room? It looks like that area's been quiet. Okay.
That wasn't my airplane.
Do you have a question in your hand? Do you have a question in your hand? Because we already heard that question. Do you have a question? Is there an airplane question in your hand? Because we've already, from a different airplane. We're just using it to.
What is your most hopeful car experience?
Hopeful?
Hopeful.
Oh, that's nice. Is that your question right
No, it came to me. And then
Oh, that's really poetic.
over here.
What's your most hopeful? H-O-P-E-F-U-L. Hopeful. Right?
In 1955, I was 11 years old, and the local Chevrolet dealer there got a new Corvette on his showroom. And I just remember thinking, I don't know, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this.
Did you get one?
Oh, yeah, I own lots of Corvettes.
That's
At
a
some point.
great story. So your first car memory is around that showroom, kind of.
Well, I actually thought my brother was the greatest thing that ever lived, and he loved cars.
Okay.
He was 15 years old. I just always, cars were just extremely important to me.
Okay, that's nice. So does somebody have a question for, wait, that was David. Wait, you were David. What's your first name? What's your name, please?
Bill.
Bill. Does someone have a question for Bill about his hopeful story about the Corvette? Okay, she has a question for you.
What color was it?
It was a 1955 Corvette.
What color?
It was aqua, actually. Ugly as sin, I the color, I didn't care.
Yeah,
It had a
it's just-
4-speed in the floor, and
Wow.
it was, V8 engine. Just the neatest thing I've ever seen.
Henriette has a question for you.
What was attractive about Corvettes? Why did you like the Corvettes? Why do you like Corvettes?
Wow. It's just a true American, it's the only American sports car, I guess, really true American sports car.
But it has a French name to it, Corvette.
Yeah.
Why?
To make it more exotic.
Yeah. It was an American attempt to make a kind of European seeming car.
At least that's what
Chevrolet.
history says.
It was already
Yeah.
Chevrolet.
Yeah.
Chevrolet, yeah.
Chevrolet had seen how well cars like the Jaguar 120 and MGs had been sold, so they thought, well, we'll try and cash in on that a little bit.
Andrea, do you want to read your question?
Oh,
Do you want to
my
read?
question?
Sure.
My question is, what do you like best about your favorite car? I'm very bland. The reason I like the car I have is because I really feel like I can master it. One of the things we've never talked about in the class is how frantic we become as soon as we have a little scratch on the car. And I'm one of those people. I get panic if I have a little bump and it looks terrible. All my life I've been, so now I have this beep, beep, beep thing, and I'm perfect. I have a 3-year-old car and it says new.
Okay.
So that's what I like about it.
Anyone have any questions for Henriette about her story? Her story response? Question?
Toyota Corolla.
Okay, so before we break, we're going to take a quick break. But before we break, why don't we hear your question, Mr. with the glasses? I can't see your face.
Me?
Yes. What's your name?
Tom.
All right, Tom, what do you got?
Chevy or Ford?
These are your questions are, I should write all of these down. I'm going to collect all of your airplanes. These are good. Okay, well, let's
what's your answer?
Let's hear you.
Ford.
Say more, say more.
Ford. Oh, we always had Fords in the house.
When you say our,
Yeah, my dad had Fords. My grandfather had Chevys. And I owned a Ford. Several.
you have a question for him?
No, I would like to add.
There's there's questions for you all over the place.
Okay. I want to say that I remember growing up, and in our neighborhood, there was 2 kinds of families. You were either a GM family or a Ford family. And it was very, very realistic in that you sometimes wouldn't talk to those other people. Because they drove those kinds of cars.
Wow.
It was like religion.
Wow.
Where did you grow up?
And even for example, people from Sweden tell me that even in Sweden it was this way between Volvo and Saab. Well, they're a Saab family. Oh, they're Volvo people.
Yes, yes.
It's very much like.
He wants to know where you grew up.
In Chicago.
Okay.
No Chrysler?
And so weird people drove those Chryslers and DeSotos.
That's fun.
Weird ones. And of course, there was an MG once no one could see.
So he has a question for you. I know you're developing another Divergent story, which is fun, but he has a question for you.
Which is your favorite, or do you have another? Is it fix or repair daily, or found on road dead? Or do you have another? I have many Fords in my life as well.
Okay.
I used to live just south of Detroit for many years.
Anyone feel like reading?
Lots of trouble usually.
No, for Ford.
Does anyone have a compelling desire to read the question that they have on their airplane? Do you want to read your question? You have it in front of you. Want to read it? Mr. Red Maroon T-shirt?
Oh, I'm just kind of playing around like a fan.
Okay, what do you got on there?
It says, if your car has a name, what would it be?
Okay.
I think it would be Phyllis, just because I like to be a little shit, and I think it's an amusing name to give to a car. So.
Okay. Does anyone, what's your first name? No, is it?
Alex.
Alex. Does anyone have a question for Alex Phyllis Carr? What's your question?
What was your first accident?
My first accident, I was not driving, but I was sitting in a shotgun seat, and I was on my way to school. My sister was driving, and my friend was in the back, and she was driving down a mountain road, and she was going too fast, and she lost control of the car, and so we hit a tree, and it spun around 180 degrees into it.
What was your first accident?
Once slipped the clutch and I accidentally hit the bumper into a parking spot. I've never actually gotten into a really bad accident before.
Ever.
Little
Fender benders?
once when somebody hit the brakes too quickly and that stuff, but then not like a bad accident where I was driving.
Okay, thank you very much. For your break, I'm going to give you an assignment. Okay.
Some break.
I know. It's a fun assignment. It's one of those 6-word Hemingway short story assignments. So has anyone ever done these before? Actually, people told me about them, and I was put my nose up in the air, and I said, I don't want to do that. But a graduate student came in, and he did it with the class, and I like what he did, and I sort of morphed on that. So let's try it. So what I want you to do is come up with a 6-word short story that tells us something about you, or your love for cars, or what you don't like about cars, or what you would like to design about cars, okay? 6 words, so go something like this. One, according to the folklore, you know the story, right? How Hemingway liked to do a lot of drinking of rum, etc. Other things too, probably in Cuba. And does anyone know the story? Because you can probably tell it better if you know it. Does anyone know Hemingway? He raised his hand. Okay, tell us the story. My way for ending the class for today is for you to tell me and everyone in the room what, for whatever reason, what you heard, what was written, what was said, what was expressed, for whatever reason it made you sort of think, maybe it reminded you of something else, but for whatever reason you will remember it. Okay, so who has some? I want to hear 5 examples. What's something you heard, or it was said, or was written, or it happened that you're going to remember from today's class? What do you have?
Engagement and connection.
Thank you. Be specific. You don't have to be abstract. Thank you. Something that someone said or a description like that, yes?
The way you've actually structured the class, you're the first person that we've had who's had us come down the front and be in a group. And there's been more backwards and forwards than with, and you had slides, you had points that you wanted to get across, but that wasn't what the class has been about. The club, we've been sharing, telling the story. It's not been a lecture.
Okay, that's what's memorable to you. Is there one story that someone told that you're going to remember? Mr. Vatican?
I'll remember your 58 Chevy story.
With the dad sitting on the steps, yeah.
And I'll also remember the story from the Mason Williams story where the Plymouth's been rear-ended and is wrecked, and he talks about his dad and other people talking about it as if it was a racehorse with a broken leg that needed to be shot.
Yes.
I always feel like that about old cars. I feel exactly like you do, that I just want to save them somehow from the knacker's yard. You know,
Yes.
I see
Yes.
it in exactly those terms.
I recommend a book to you, Jim Adams' book, Good Product, Bad Product, because he likes to save old things. You know Jim Adams' work, Good Product, Bad Product, but he's just, and look him up too. He's on the website. He's a professor emeritus here. Anyone else? A moment someone said something, you heard something that for whatever reason you're going to remember it? Anyone else? Thank you so much. I've enjoyed meeting you. I've enjoyed every single minute. I've enjoyed the challenge. I enjoyed the surprise. And I enjoyed interacting with you. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Let's pick up a couple of issues. Can we do that? Just for the last few minutes, because has anybody, or Barbara, do you know if there's any studies that kind of gather all these kind of stories together and see what patterns there are? Because we were getting patterns coming out here of things that we tune into, that we recognize, that are perhaps familiar. But is there a structure, a grammar to these stories about cars?
Specifically about cars.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really important paper, a book to write, because so far that hasn't been done.
No, I don't know of anything.
Yes.
But it would seem to me that given, how significant, and we know this, it's widely accepted, and you're right to say this, the stories we have about our cars are so important to why we like cars, why we buy the things, and how they, with Mason Williams, virtually telling a story about his life through the cars. I would imagine, I can't see why car companies haven't done this research and investigated what it is that people adore in narrative terms about their cars. And therefore, how could you make sure that your new car, your new model car, your new design for next year tunes into those stories? Now, we do have some people from the car industry in here. Do companies do that?
Researchers, and they study culture, they study what people do and want, how they live, their lifestyles, what they eat, where they go to dinner, where they shop.
That's not narrative based.
But that's not the same as...
No, it's not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, for example, do market segmentation and look at demographics and stuff, but that is not, and it may. I just want to know, I wonder if they've gone that far.
Done a study of automotive fiction or narrative like they do studies of detective fiction.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, the stories we've heard today, we could go into it, and you mentioned where you come from, Bill, where you grew up, Chicago, okay. And we're getting into some of the culture of, you know, the Ford people versus the Chevy people. You do not know how archaeological that is, really.
It's totally.
You know, that is kind of like a cultural thing. And you could really go into that, but it's not specifically about, you know, market segmentation and demographics. I think it's richer, it's deeper. And it seems to me that if we want to, you know, if the car companies, as they are surely, yes, wanting to do, understand their clients, their markets, and expanding them and giving people what they desire and want, this is a way to do it. And I just don't know whether they go into that. And have some of you come across it? Yeah.
I think the Chevy runs deep commercials that have been running. They really do tell stories, and I think that that's a really good example.
Have you seen cars then that you would want to buy that kind of set up a kind of scenario for you? You can see stories that you could be having in those cars.
The Great Gatsby, that's how you started the announcement of this class.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the power of narrative. But I'm wondering if there's a way of using these, if people have done this, taken the strength of these narratives and worked with it and followed it through.
Well, I think I'm actually going to sort of play a bottle of water on your theory, is that people don't always buy a car based on what they, like, there's the car that you would love to have, and then there's the car you drive, the car you buy.
Yeah.
So, and especially these days, there are many factors that go into it that is more than just like handling, beauty, design.
Yeah.
You also are concerned about $4 gas and your commute and other people banging into your car. And so, you know, we'd love to have garages with 3 different cars, or 10 different cars, or 20 different cars to sort of fulfill all the car needs, but usually you can only buy 1 or 2. So, you know, I would love to have, well, I have a Mini Cooper, and I love it, and it's, you know, a great decision for me. I didn't get the fun line one, I got an S because I wasn't, you know, my commute's short, it's great, but if I was making that decision and I had a different commute and I lived in a different place, you know, I would be tempted by the Bolt, or I'd never be tempted by the Prius, but, you know, there are other considerations.
But you're even in just telling this though, you're referring to kind of narrative scenarios of what kind of commute you typically do. So you're taking us through a story of your life and how particular cars fit into that. And it is there. I'm just intrigued as to how far you could take it. John?
Car companies always have focus groups where they take all the nomenclature of cars, and they may not even announce what car company they're from, and they'll bring a prototype car, and they'll have people look at it, and if it's drivable, drive it, or play in it, whatever the you know, how far along the prototype is. And so I think there's a blurry line between that demographic segmentation and storytelling, because automobile manufacturers have always marketed like they're aspirational vehicle.
That's the marketing, yeah.
But it's storytelling too.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not disagreeing. Yeah,
you know, people in the in the 1990s bought SUVs, and they had to have 4-wheel drive, even though they never left the city and didn't even take it out in the rains.
Yeah.
But they wanted that, you know.
Yeah.
Because they believed in that storytelling, that was a lifestyle they wanted. So I think it's a blurry line between the two.
One of the things where Barbara and I are both coming from, and indeed David last week, is from, you know, our mechanical engineering design division, which includes the D School. And there's a lot of emphasis placed in what we do there upon this, well, what you've heard, how storytelling, narrative components are, you know, if you like, a very significant component in the meeting design challenges, needs, taking design forward. We did do a little bit of work a while ago with, my lab did, with Chrysler. And we were looking at really building essentially foresight modeling, seeing where car design would go. And we were working with their people, and so that's where I got to know the kind of how they were approaching the marketing. But the notion of, you know, this kind of storytelling was not particularly, they didn't really quite get it. I'm not saying that's just an anecdote. It was just our particular experience. I'm just intrigued as to how far you could go with this narrative approach.
No, I find, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think if you keep looking at the written word, you might miss things, right? Because in the 20th century, we had several other media come out, mass media, right? You had music, we talked about that, I think, a couple of times, the songs about the Chevys and the Cadillacs, right? We also had movies like James Bond and the BMW. So there's a story, there's a narrative, and BMW pays them to use the car.
Absolutely, actually, that's a very prominent. The latest James Bond has so much product placement in it. It's just crazy, you know. Yeah.
No, I was just going to add, when you're talking about, I just dropped from my screen your question, but I'd like to question about, you know, is there a way for us to do the research or understand the research around narrative for what people adore and the story about their cars? And the ERL, you know, the Volkswagen ERL lab, is there anybody from there in here? So they looked at, a couple of those students were in my class last year, and they looked at all the classes that were being offered in Revs, and they thought they all looked great, but the one they wanted to work with wasn't the engineering or the design classes, it was this one, because they wanted to know more about the story piece, because that qualitative piece is so much more difficult. Like quantifying is one thing, but just so much more difficult, and they don't really have a handle on it. And when they came in, they did something I was thinking about, but it would be if we had a second class, like next year when you take the class. What they did was they came in, I said, come in with something that we'll do together, and then we'll work on it. And what they did was they had the students do sort of like a Twitter, like 140 characters or less, describe an experience in your car as much as you can, as specific as you can. And then we had all guess the car that the person described without saying the name of the car, and everyone guessed it. It was fascinating. It was, I'm like, but it makes sense now that you sort of think about it. When you, in the car class that I'm referring to, there are people across the gamut. There was the car lover, there was the passionate person, the interested person. They like looking at cars, they think they're nice. It wasn't just all car enthusiasts in there, so it's pretty interesting. There's room for research in this, Michael.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of when you mentioned the car that everyone could guess what it was. There's a really famous Top Gear episode, the British one, where they take a Toyota Tacoma, which anyone who's played with one of them knows the episode I'm talking about. They're incredibly durable cars. They can take some of the worst beatings of any car I've ever heard of. And they put the Tacoma at the top of the building, and then blow the building, and then drive the car away. And after that, they took the broken car that still was able to drive, and they put it up above the studio while they're doing all their filming, and you can see it in certain scenes. And so anyone that watches Top Gear after that happened can get a piece of that narrative about that car and get a feel for its durability. So they put it up as a trophy, but it's like a constant reminder, and there is a narrative then attached to the Tacoma as being like, wow, it can blow the building and it'll drive away. So there is some degree of fun that's happening.
Yeah. John, yeah.
You mentioned Toyota. I was going to talk about Toyota as well. We were talking about advertising campaign. Didn't Toyota do a campaign for the Camry when they facelifted the Camry just recently, where they wanted you to tell stories about your experiences in the Camry? And I thought that was interesting because, and forgive me if you own a Camry, but I thought it was a way of making a boring car really interesting, because the stories are what makes cars interesting. You know, a Ferrari, you don't need to tell stories about it, do you? Damn thing's exciting, just sitting there with the engine switched off. Whereas the Camry, in order to make it exciting, they asked people to participate. And I thought that was quite interesting, because I got to thinking there's probably some really cool car stories there that, I mean, I have no interest in Camrys. I have no interest in you know, you see what I mean? I just thought it was an interesting idea using to persuade people to use that. And of course, it's so all tied in with this idea of social networking, and we all create content now as well as consuming it. We're often creating it and consuming it at the same time. So I thought that was quite
that came out a little bit, didn't it, last week? And we've had this comment before about cars seen, you know, in utilitarian terms. So the Camry is relatively bland because it's about getting from point A to B. And as David was sharing with us last week, he's not so interested in that at all. He likes the kind of quirkiness, the richness, the, you know, things that have been done to the car that that make it distinctive, individual, whatever. However, of course, our world is full of functionality, and we can hang all sorts of stuff off that blandness. So yeah, it's not an either-or situation. And maybe, you know, I think looking ahead, perhaps, you know, that blandness is perhaps going to be more a feature of, you know, the driving experience. And so finding ways of plugging in all this human storytelling narrative component is quite something. It's quite a challenge. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. So the first car that I drove was this World War II
Yeah.
Jeep. The second one was a Toyota Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
And what I noticed when I came to the United States, I was seeing a lot of documentaries. And whenever there was a documentary, it was always a Toyota truck or
Yeah.
Land Cruiser
Yeah.
or something like that that they were using. And my family's always been a Toyota family. So I'm the only one that's,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm driving a Scion, so that's still a Toyota family in there. I figured it's the most interesting one. But it's just interesting that there is that thought of stability.
Yeah. This is the branding, it, you know, we know tunes into this kind of thing. But this interesting thing, you know, you mentioned, you know, World War II Jeep, the Philippines, and you know, your first experience. Oh my God! And, you know, Barbara was absolutely right to tune in that. My goodness, that sets a scene. It really does. And now you've added, you know, a Toyota Land Cruiser to it. Oh, yeah. You can start putting together. And maybe it's our kind of shared experiences of this that allows us, in an incredibly abbreviated, concentrated way, to tune in. You know, because like you say, you know, Ford people and GM people or Chevy people, boy, that's abbreviation, you know, and yet you can hang so much off that. There's an anthropological concept here, which is kind of, it's awkward. And it was coined by Marcel Mauss, a French anthropologist, 20th century. And he had this notion that there are some artifacts in society, and he called them total social facts, that are highly focused, dense, concentrated cultural phenomena. And they kind of, you know, you can hang so much off them in this kind of way. And I think the car is one of those. It's focused, it's abbreviated, and there's something that we kind of get it. I'm not into, particularly, I mean, okay, we're American now, we've been here 15 years, but I didn't grow up with Ford versus Chevy, but I kind of get it. And I can see in, you know, just a little bit of rudimentary knowledge about the range of Fords and the history of Ford in the 20th century, and Chevy and all the rest. Yes, it's a profound metaphor.
It's like Socrates in England.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're a Man City, you're a Man United family. Absolutely. There's a concentration there, a focus, that even if you're not party to that world, even if you're not a car enthusiast, absolutely you get it. Yes, interesting. We have to respect time. It is past our finish.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.